Dear participants, welcome to our call for action meeting on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. The meeting will start in a couple of minutes. We're having a bit of delay. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this call for action meeting on the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals in the OSCE area. I would like to briefly begin with a disclaimer before giving the floor to the President for the official opening. And the disclaimer is about the fact that we are proceeding with this topic, an important topic, which we were supposed to discuss last January, but of course we had to postpone the meeting for a number of reasons. But the fact that we're proceeding in no manner implies disregard for the ongoing events in Ukraine. Our hearts and minds are indeed with the Ukrainian people affected by this tragic conflict, and we are closely following the events on the ground as they unfold. So having clarified this point, I would now like to give the floor to President Söderfeldt, who will now officially open the meeting. Madam President, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sanier. Dear participants, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the Secretariat for arranging this meeting. I would also like to thank Vice President and Special Representative on the SDG, Mr. Shakirov, for arranging this meeting, as well as the head of the second committee, Mr. Pons. And I would like to say also thank you everybody for joining our meeting today to discuss the role that we parliamentarians can play to implement the Sustainable Development Goal, or the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted by the United Nations and all its member countries. There is 17 goals, and one of them is about peace, about how to achieve long-standing peace, free from fear and violence. And I think this is a very appropriate issue today when we have a war inside the OSCE region, where Russia shows aggression against Ukraine. We can't let this happen. We need to go further on and try to support the peace process with respect for the Ukraine territorium. But we do also need to continue our work with other issues, because all the work of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly is important. And what's very, very often happens when there is a war is, as all of you know, that other issues are taking on the side. But we can't let this happen, because if we do so, there will be a stop for the implementation of the SDGs. They are not only about peace directly, but indirectly about peace. It's about sustainability in our society, about the climate, about the economy, about the rights for minorities, about the rights for women, about education, all the areas where we as politicians can make a difference. In our daily parliamentary work, we make laws, we debate, we scrutinize the government, we take initiatives, but we are also part of our constitution, where we meet our voters. And I think this is one of the most important parts. And there could we also get inspirations how to proceed. And I would like to mention here, proceed with the SDGs, because if we manage to implement them in our work, we are also contributing to the Agenda 2030 and for a more sustainable and peaceful OSCE region. I would also like to add the importance of the civil society and the civil society's engagement to ensuring public participation in the development of the policies for the SDGs. And I would like to mention as well the participation of the youth about the future. We need to include them in our work. Today, just as every day, we are talking about funds and financiation. And I think this need also to be debated when we talk about the SDGs. How can we support financially the implementation? And for OSCE, it's of course crucial to support the implementation, but I would also like to mention here that it's both on the multilateral level, we need to have this dialogue and program to how to move forward, as well as the national level. It goes together. And I would like to say that the war from Russia against Ukraine, it shows the importance for our work as parliamentarians, for peace, for sustainability, and the need to not stop with our development work. And one important part of this is the SDGs. I will be with you quite along in this afternoon, but not the whole seminar, because I have several other meetings related to the conflicts that I need to take part in. But I look forward to a continued solid international dialogue and strong partnership and commitment. Wish you a very interesting afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam President, for setting the scene with your introductory statement. And I would like now to turn to the OSCE PA Vice President and Special Representative on SDGs, Mr. Askar Shakirov. Mr. Shakirov, you have the floor. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Good afternoon, dear President, dear Secretary General, dear colleagues and guests. First of all, as Special Representative on Sustainable Development Goals, I would like to welcome you to our parliamentary web dialogue and thank you for taking time to contribute to very important discussions on the current state of play around the implementation of the SDGs and the role of parliamentary dimension in that regard. 2020 marked the start of a decade of ambitious action to achieve the SDGs by 2030. The decade of action calls for accelerating the implementation of sustainable solutions to the world's biggest challenges, from poverty and gender, climate change, inequality, and closing the financing gap. As it is indicated in the Sustainable Development Goals Report 2021, prepared by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs in collaboration with more than 50 international agencies, the world is not on track to achieve the goals by 2030. Even before the COVID-19 outbreak, progress had been spotty. Now, with the pandemic continuing, progress has stalled, and in some cases, decades of progress have been reversed. The world is challenged as never before. Wealth and gender inequality, environmental degradation and climate change, violent extremism and terrorism, organized crime, corruption, global health threats, humanitarian crisis, armed conflicts, sanctions, and forced displacement, instability. Despite the presentation of data by the Economist Group indicating that the first 18 months of the pandemic had wiped out 5 years of SDGs progress, pushing 97 million people back into poverty. The 2030 Agenda offers a risk map for an inclusive, equitable, and sustainable recovery. In the same way, as COVID-19 has highlighted the heavily integrated and independent nature of our world, whether it be our health, economies, social systems, governments, or environment, the UN SDGs acknowledge that the challenges we face are inherently connected and require structural transformations and common solutions. The events on recent days are of great concern for all of us. Unfortunately, peaceful civilians suffer from the conflict in Ukraine. The escalation of the conflict could have serious consequences for sustainable development in the OSCE region. Obviously, the SDGs proclaimed by the UN are characterized primarily by their commonality and indivisibility for the entire world community. International security is based on the same principles. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev said that Kazakhstan, which hosted the OSCE summit in 2010, adheres to the principle of a common and indivisible security, which implies mutual understanding based on mutual trust. He called on both states to make utmost efforts to pursue a dialogue and work on a peaceful settlement. Dear colleagues, shifting this global 2030 agenda into actionable national policies requires a concerted effort. A key element of the 2030 agenda is that people must be included at every stage, from initial policy design to implementation and monitoring. National parliaments must work to facilitate this. We as parliamentarians must support efforts to achieve SDGs, taking into account the national characteristics on each country. Our responsibility is to ensure that governments are held accountable for the goals they have signed up to, and to ensure that appropriate laws and budgets are passed and approved. Every effort must be made to ensure that such goals acquire an official status in each parliament with sufficient time for their discussion and monitoring. The OSCE offers us a unique platform for sharing our national experiences and lessons learned in implementation of SDGs, as well as important information that enables us to better exercise our oversight and legislative functions to meet the deadlines for the realization of SDGs. Today's event invites all participants to exchange views and valuable insights on the role of national parliaments and the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly in ensuring the realization of SDGs. Moreover, this event provides an opportunity to have an in-depth debate on the ways to increase the profile of the OSCE in that regard. Although the concept paper prepared by the International Secretariat highlights the most relevant SDGs where the added value of the OSCE is paramount, SDG 13 and 16, I would like to encourage everyone to share their views on the goals that represent a particular value for the Helsinki Plus 50 agenda. As a representative of Kazakhstan, I want to note that in my country, the SDGs are by 80% integrated in the country's strategic documents. Next year, we will present its second voluntary national review of progress on achieving SDGs at the high-level political forum. In 2021, Kazakhstan ranks 59th out of 166 countries of SDGs, having improved its position by 6 points compared to last year. To provide coordinated support for the implementation of the 2030 agenda in the Central Asia, Kazakhstan is working to establish a regional SDG center under the auspices of the UN in the city Almaty, with the ability to help the Central Asian countries and Afghanistan. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We've taken note of your considerations and your information. Let's keep those points in mind also for the debate later on. We move now to the panel. Let me only point out one thing. Mr. Ponce San Pietro, the chair of the General Committee on Economic Affairs, Science, Technology and Environment of the Parliamentary Assembly, just informed us that he's attending a plenary session of the Spanish Parliament and therefore we are not sure, and he is not sure at what time he might be able to join us. So I will skip him in the list of the speakers, and if he doesn't manage to join us by the time of the last speaker of the panel, I will ask Mr. Marco Bonabello of the Secretariat here to read out Mr. Pon's statement, and hopefully he will join us for the debate, and he can make some additional points or comments in that context. So we will start now the panel. I'm very glad to give the floor to the chairwoman of the Senate of the Holy Majlis of the Republic of Uzbekistan, Mrs. Tanzila Narbayeva. Ms. Narbayeva, you have the floor.
Спасибо большое, господин Занер. Уважаемый госпожа Седерфельд, уважаемый господин Шакиров, уважаемые дамы и господа, прежде всего позвольте поприветствовать всех участников сегодняшней нашей встречи. Рада возможности очередной раз встретиться с госпожой Седерфельд. Мы с ней встречались в Ташкенте 26 октября 2021 года. Очень приятно вас еще раз видеть. Я хотела бы поблагодарить заместителя председателя Парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ, специального представителя по целям устойчивого развития господина Аскара Шакирова за инициативу проведения этой знаковой встречи, нацеленной на дальнейшее повышение роли парламента в реализации целей устойчивого развития в регионе ОБСЕ. Безусловно, основным условием достижения ЦУР является не только деятельность исполнительной власти, но и активная роль парламентариев в этом процессе. Следовательно, парламент в качестве истинной школы демократии является основным инициатором реализации долгосрочных целей устойчивого развития. Уважаемые участники сегодняшней встречи, символично, что мероприятие совпало с празднованием 30-летия юбилея присоединения Узбекистана к ОБСЕ. Кроме того, ровно 30 лет назад наша страна стала полноправным членом Организации Объединенных Наций в качестве суверенного и независимого государства. Одним из важных направлений взаимодействия между ООН и Узбекистаном является последовательное достижение цели устойчивого развития. В 2015 году Узбекистан присоединился к международной повестке дня по устойчивому развитию, озвученной на саммите ООН, и взял на себя обязательства по выполнению на национальном уровне ЦУР до 2030 года. В октябре 2018 года Узбекистаном были приняты и адаптированы под национальный контекст все цели устойчивого развития, 125 задач и 206 индикаторов. При поддержке ПРООН был запущен специальный веб-портал по национальным ЦУР, в котором отражены статистические данные по 119 индикаторам и ведется работа по сбору данных по оставшимся индикаторам. Хотелось бы подчеркнуть, что парламенты, несомненно, играют особую роль в обеспечении своевременной и эффективной реализации этих приоритетных задач. В этой связи на 75-й сессии Генеральной Ассамблеи ООН президент Республики Узбекистан Шавкат Мирзиёев выдвинул предложение о принятии специальной резолюции Генассамблеи о повышении роли парламентов в достижении ЦУР и обеспечении прав человека. В настоящее время в Узбекистане эффективно функционирует Координационный совет во главе с заместителем премьер-министра Республики Узбекистан. Для осуществления эффективного парламентского надзора за реализацией национальных целей и задач в области устойчивого развития с 2020 года в Али-Маджлисе, то есть в парламенте нашей страны, действует парламентская комиссия. В рамках ее деятельности регулярно проводится мониторинг хода реализации национальных задач как на республиканском, так и на региональном уровнях. Только за последние 2 года в рамках парламентского контроля в государственные органы было направлено 1543 депутатских и сенаторских запросов, а также 56 парламентских запросов в правительство. В результате контрольной деятельности парламентской комиссии правительству было поручено пересмотреть подход к целям устойчивого развития. В этой связи недавно правительством принято постановление, согласно которому новая дорожная карта утверждена до 2026 года. Расширен состав Координационного совета. сформированы экспертные и межведомственные рабочие группы по работе с индикаторами и финансированию национальных целей устойчивого развития. Парламентская комиссия на регулярной основе рассматривает вопросы финансирования национальных целей устойчивого развития. На сегодня 72% государственного бюджета направляются на реализацию мероприятий ЦУР. В 2020 году на политическом форуме высокого уровня по устойчивому развитию, который прошел под председательством экономического и социального совета ООН «Экосос», Узбекистан впервые представил добровольный национальный обзор по целям устойчивого развития. В 2021 году впервые была проведена неделя целей устойчивого развития. В ее рамках Узбекистан первым среди других стран выступил с инициативой по объединению усилий парламентариев в области устойчивого развития. В прошлом году в городе Бухаре успешно проведен международный форум на тему «Межпарламентское глобальное сотрудничество в достижении целей устойчивого развития». В нем приняли участие около 500 экспертов из более 100 государств мира, представители 30 международных неправительственных организаций, руководители 5 международных межпарламентских организаций, включая генерального секретаря Межпарламентского союза господина Мартина Чунконга. Нет сомнений, что практическая реализация принятой по его итогам декларации будет способствовать дальнейшему обеспечению более инклюзивного, открытого и прозрачного выполнения глобальной повестки дня устойчивого развития. Уважаемые коллеги, Узбекистан подтверждает свою приверженность повестке дня в области устойчивого развития на период до 2030 года, десятилетию действий по достижению глобальных целей и другим нормативным рамкам, разработанным под эгидой ООН. Генеральный секретарь ООН Антонио Гутерриш в ходе недавнего форума Международной организации труда, который прошло 22 февраля этого года, отметил, что выполнение ЦУР находится под угрозой. В этой связи видим необходимость в активизации усилий ОБСЕ в этом направлении. Со своей стороны мы открыты к сотрудничеству со всеми странами, членами и институтами ОБСЕ в рамках реализации ЦУР. Выражаем также готовность содействовать эффективному выполнению мандата специального представителя Парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ по целям в области устойчивого развития. Убеждена, что по итогам сегодняшнего мероприятия будут разработаны полезные, необходимые для всех нас рекомендации. Желаю всем нам крепкого здоровья, а также успешной и плодотворной работы. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Can I now move to the next speaker, Dr. Hans Kluge, who is the Regional Director for Europe of the World Health Organization. Mr. Kluge, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Ms. Margarita Sederfeld, Mr. Oskar Shakirov, уважаемый Tanzila Narbayeva, OSCE members, fellow panelists, distinguished delegates and friends. We are currently fighting health threats on multiple fronts in the WHO, European region and Central Asia. Ensuring everyone has the right to health lies at the core of WHO's mandate in a pandemic, in humanitarian crisis, and in conflict. As the situation unfolds in Ukraine and on its borders, WHO is doing everything in its power to ensure continuity of essential health services to the countless people impacted. We are now setting up a logistics base in Poland to mobilize humanitarian health supplies and health kits into Ukraine, with the first charter plane scheduled to land today, looking to establish a sub-office to provide technical and operational support to Ukraine and neighboring countries, hosting Ukrainians, and we have deployed technical teams to the Republic of Moldova, Romania and Poland, with further deployments on the way. Tonight, I myself will lead the team to Poland tomorrow to operationalize the hub. Although the situation in Ukraine is uppermost on our minds. We have also been fighting a deadly virus for the past 2 years. There have been countless lessons that we need to take on board to avoid repeating mistakes of the past. COVID-19 has taught us that health cannot be separated from economic or social development. Health governance, partnerships, and multilateralism must be strengthened urgently across regions and globally, as called for by the WHO's Pan-European Commission on Health and Sustainable Development, and as agreed by the countries through the development of a global accord on pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. 2 years in, the indicators of human development have declined, and the pandemic has caused grave setbacks in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Universal health coverage is a critical component of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Target 3.8 seeks to ensure that all people can access high-quality health services whenever and wherever they need them without suffering financial hardship. What COVID-19 has highlighted is that no country in Europe and Central Asia has achieved this yet. Findings from the European Health Report that we'll be launching next week shows that many households in Europe and Central Asia are still unable to pay for healthcare. The incidence of catastrophic health spending ranges from 1% to 19% across member states. And let me explain, how do we make healthcare universal and address the gaps that COVID-19 has widened? Number one, by recognizing that investing in health and health systems is an investment in human and social capital that contributes to the protection of human rights and dignity. Number two, improving primary healthcare in line with the Almaty and Astana Declaration as a cornerstone of a sustainable system. Three, ensuring that we train, build, and retain a skilled workforce to increase a sense of community within systems, boost resilience, and bring about socio-economic change. Four, applying a transformative people-centered approach to quality of care that includes lifelong learning and evidence-based training. Five, addressing mental health. That means efforts to improve prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of mental ill health. And six, ensuring a safe and affordable supply of medicines and vaccines to all. 6 simple pathways with a tangible impact. All these are areas where the WHO Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia is applying targeted, evidence-based measures, such as through the establishment of a Center for Excellence for Quality of Care and Patient Safety in Athens, the creation of a mental health coalition, and the Oslo Medicines Initiative. However, the key to effectively bridging the gap between goals and results lies in adapting and contextualizing international best practices to national and local context. And that is where parliamentarians as health leaders enter the stage. Parliamentarians, you excellencies, can improve citizens' health, remove access barriers, and fight poverty. You can attract funds, ensure accountability, and safeguard health security, a public good that people rightfully expect from their elected representatives. Laws shaped and enacted by parliamentarians are a powerful instrument for advancing cross-regional and global health. Yet, these remain underutilized and poorly understood. Universal health coverage can only be achieved with a legal foundation. WHO has generated evidence to support policymakers with country-specific recommendations on the path to universal health coverage. We advise countries to analyze their legal, regulatory frameworks at international, national, and local level and assess compatibility with the ultimate aim of ensuring an environment that builds resilient, accessible, and quality health systems. We call on member states to integrate equity, efficiency, and financial risk protection into health system policies. This requires legal analysis, multi-stakeholder dialogue, and policy discussions, and WHO is ready to assist. Today, efforts to address health inequities, climate change, biodiversity loss, conflicts, migration, and pandemics remain compartmentalized, but we can change that. COVID-19 is a wake-up call to place health at the center of sustainable development. I will finish now in the Russian language. У нас есть необходимые дорожные карты. Рекомендации Общеевропейской комиссии по вопросам здоровья и устойчивого развития. Европейские программы работы ВОС и цели в области устойчивого развития. Теперь нам нужно сотрудничать, воплощать эти дорожные карты в жизнь и добиваться успехов с такой же энергией и настойчивостью, как это было во время пандемии. Спасибо вам большое.
Thank you, Mr. Kluge, for your statement, which is touching, of course, an area that has affected all of us. And thank you also for your recommendations to parliamentarians. I take this opportunity also to say that to the extent possible, we'll try to circulate the statements to our parliamentarians so they can look into them. In your case, the list of recommendations, the points that you made, for hopefully follow-on action in individual national parliaments. Thank you very much. We move on now to Ambassador Luca Fratini. I'm very glad to welcome him. He's the director of the Office of the Secretary General of the OSCE, and I think it will be a good opportunity to hear from him also what are the initiatives of the executive structures in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals by the OSCE. Ambassador Fratini, dear Luca, you have the floor.
Thank you, dear Lamberto. I hope you can hear me. Yes?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam President, Ambassador Zanier, honorable members of parliament, dear colleagues, I know how hard it is for all of us to focus on a subject other than the ongoing war in Ukraine these days. My thoughts are with the families of the victims, and allow me to express the wish that peace prevail. I also convey the regards from Secretary General Helga Maria Schmid, who is currently in Moldova to assist with the ongoing evacuation of OSCE personnel from Ukraine. My focus today is on how the OSCE contributes to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals through all its executive structures. Clearly, regional organizations, and the OSCE is one of the most relevant of them, play a key role in supporting their members in that endeavor. This can be relevant both at country level, but also at sub-regional and regional levels when envisaging joint actions among different organizations. In addition, I have to note that many multilateral and civil society organizations, as well as a host of other actors, are increasingly demonstrating how their work contributes to the SDGs. And they are expecting partners, including those that they fund, to do the same. When it comes to the OSCE, my assessment is that our organization has a lot to offer towards the SDG implementation. A Security Days event on this very topic was held, organized by then Secretary General Greminger back in 2019. And those of you who were there surely will remember the lively debate around the theme. This theme is ever more relevant today. Allow me to mention a few key points on why the OSCE is so well positioned to play a key role in the SDG, in promoting the SDG implementation. First of all, our comprehensive security approach fully aligns with the interlinked nature of the Sustainable Development Goals, and also with the 5 interconnected pillars of the Agenda 2030. The 5 Ps, people, peace, prosperity, planet, and partnerships. Then, as a security organization focused on prevention to a large degree, the entry point for us is the peace pillar, and in particular SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. Plus, of course, the partnerships overarching goal, number 17. As this SDG is considered as an enabler or a catalyst for successful implementation of all the other goals, the OSCE also contributes indirectly to a large number of SDGs through its network of partnerships with other countries. I wish to mention the Partners for Cooperation, both in the Mediterranean and in the Asia Pacific, but also other international organizations and civil society institutions and entities. Thirdly, the OSCE supports not only the participating states in their implementation of the SDGs, but its work on security and stability also enables and helps to improve the processes to achieve Agenda 2030. So it's a two-way street which benefits and helps strengthen its comprehensive security approach. A separate mention should be made to conflict prevention. This would deserve a separate discussion, but allow me just to say here that this core activity of the organization can be pursued in parallel with a number of goals from the 2030 agenda, not limited to the political sphere. Think, for example, of how security can also be pursued through SDG 13 on climate change. And in this regard, I am saddened to note that, unfortunately, a high-level conference on climate change and security, which was supposed to be held at the end of March, on Secretariat's initiative to follow up on the very recent Stockholm decision of December 2020, was postponed due to the terrible situation in Ukraine. So we hope that this can be put back in the calendar soon. Back to the topic, I would also want to say that the membership, being so large and inclusive of our organization, can allow for a broad geographic reach. And this is also done through the field operations, not only the institutions and the Secretariat, which are Vienna-based or The Hague-based or Warsaw-based. And my final point with regard to those entry lines for the OSCE and its executive structure is that the links between sustainable development on one hand and the OSCE's principles and commitments in all 3 dimensions of security had already been recognized since the Helsinki Final Act. So this is nothing new to us, and I would say that subsequent documents have further clarified these connections, I would like to mention the strategy document for the economic and environmental dimension of 2003, which has a dedicated section on sustainable development. In more recent years, there's been a number of OSCE Ministerial Council decisions and declarations that reference the 2030 agenda. In concrete terms, what do we do? Well, we have made a preliminary assessment of the link between the main OSCE activities and the Sustainable Development Goals. A breakdown by area of activity shows those complementarities, but just for you to have one single example, not to be too long, but for instance, any project in environmental activities would have an impact on Goal 1, no poverty, on Goal 3, on good health and well-being, Goal 5, of course, on gender equality, 6 on clean water and sanitation, 7 on clean energy, and so on and so forth. So you can see that really the mandate of the organization covers so many of the SDGs, and we are very proud of that. To measure the impact, the Secretariat has recently introduced SDG Markers for XB projects to see how they contribute to SDGs. This was done previously for gender related objectives. So each project has a gender marker and now has also an SDG marker. We have also encouraged Secretariat departments to integrate a paragraph on how the implementation of SDGs is supported in all the various Secretariat regular reporting formats, such as the budget documents, the annual report, and the weekly PC reports as well. Based on the above, the OSCE aims to step up its profile at the HLPF, the annual UN High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, and also at the UNECE Regional Forum. We hope that this can happen soon. I will conclude with the role of parliaments because this is, of course, your area. I would just limit myself to recalling that your role is crucially important in shaping the content of the agenda by contributing perspectives on gaps, opportunities, and priorities for action. But even more importantly, legislators are uniquely positioned to act as an interface between the people and the state institutions. And I see this as an opportunity and at the same time a responsibility to play an active role in supporting and monitoring SDG implementation. In this context, my plea, and I'm echoing President Sederfeldt's words, would be for parliaments to work primarily with youth representatives in their respective countries in the promotion of SDGs. The younger generation has shown enormous sensitivity in this regard and can certainly play a concrete leading role if given the opportunity to do so. Just as a conclusion, let me assure you that there is plenty of room for enhanced cooperation and synergies between the intergovernmental and the parliamentary components of the OSCE, also in advancing the Sustainable Development Goals. Initiatives like the Call for Action and today's discussion are a very valid contribution in this regard. And the Secretariat, but I think I can also speak on behalf of the institutions and our field operations, stand ready to support this work even further. I thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Ambassador Fratini, dear Luca, for your intervention, and I look forward also to the engagement of you and the other panelists in the debate. We will have now a video message by Mr. Bainsley, who is the Deputy Director and Senior Economist at the UNDP Regional Bureau for Europe and the CIS.
Excellencies, distinguished parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to begin by thanking Mr. Askar Shakirov, OSCE Parliamentary Assembly Vice President and Kazakhstan Special Representative on the Sustainable Development Goals, for the invitation to speak today. Thanks also to the Parliamentary Assembly for organizing this important debate on the centralities of the SDGs to future and current development challenges and how parliaments can help to achieve these goals. The unfolding situation in Ukraine is a dire reminder of the fragility of peace in our region. It is also important to acknowledge that over the last few years, we have seen growing risks from diminishing civic space, the erosion of social cohesion, challenges to the rule of law and human rights, elite capture and corruption, the increased stigmatization of minority groups, conflicts between communities in extractive industries, divisive narratives and hate speech, new waves of displacement, election-related unrest, and cross-border and ethnic tensions. The SDGs are many things, but they are, among other things, a call to action to better manage these risks, not only to end poverty and protect the planet, but also to significantly reduce all forms of violence and to work with governments and communities to end conflicts and reduce insecurities. As you know very well, parliamentarians have critical roles to play in driving forward people-centered development that is responsive to citizen needs. Goal 16, which promotes peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, access to justice for all, and effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels, is particularly relevant. UNDP has therefore been working closely with the Inter-Parliamentary Union to finalize the relevant sub-indicators for parliaments of the SDGs. This is part of our close partnership with the IPU, as well as with Parliamentarians for Global Action, to strengthen national parliaments, and this work is currently ongoing in some 60 countries. During the pandemic, we worked with parliaments in over 20 countries to raise the effectiveness of digitalized parliamentary work. We have also delivered trainings for parliamentarians on such topics as aligning budgets with international gender equality and human rights obligations, enhancing parliamentary transparency, and oversight of SDG implementation. At a time when we see increasing distrust between institutions, governments, and citizens, we need to join forces and find innovative ways of empowering and engaging people in politics and shaping the work in this way of parliaments and governments. UNDP looks forward to continuing our critical work with you in these areas to achieve the SDGs and safeguard human security. Thank you very much.
So this was the video message by Mr. Bengsley. In the meantime, I see that Mr. Pon San Pietro is still attending the plenary session of the Parliament. So we'll ask Marco Bonabello if he could deliver the speech on his behalf. Marco, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Lamberto. Thank you and good afternoon to everyone. I will now read the statement that was prepared by Chair Tere Pons on the occasion of this important meeting. Dear President Sederfeld, dear Vice President Shakirov, dear Lamberto, dear colleagues, it is a great pleasure to join you today and discuss the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in our region. I must say that I'm glad you decided to go on with this event, despite what is happening in Ukraine. A large-scale invasion of an independent country will never be considered a legitimate means to pursue national security interests. Quite to the contrary, it is against all international norms. It fuels unpredictable tensions and it generates enormous human suffering. As chair of our General Committee on Economic Affairs, Science, Technology and Environment, I'm also well aware that our security work will be profoundly impacted by these tragic developments. Economic, financial and social distress, energy crisis, environmental hazards, and mass waves of refugees are just some of the most obvious consequences. This is why we need to redouble our efforts and work hard to realize our 2030 agenda for sustainable development. Possibly more than ever, we need to give peace, development, and cooperation a real chance. Dear colleagues, the The implementation of SDGs is key to strengthen multilateralism and promote lasting peace in the region. Sustainable development, poverty reduction, and climate policy lie at the very heart of the 2030 Agenda, which calls for nothing less than the transformation of our world. Resonating with the focus of our committee, SDGs advocate for leaving no one behind, while reconciling global economic progress with social justice and the conservation of our environment. Clearly, collaborative efforts of all stakeholders are necessary to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that by 2030, all people enjoy stability and prosperity. As the 17 SDGs are deeply intertwined, action in one area will affect outcomes in all the others. Hence, it is imperative to duly balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability in building our shared future. With the signing of the Helsinki Final Act in 1975, our participating states underlined the link between security and sustainable development. OSCE's comprehensive approach to security lies on the recognition that wars and instability may arise not only from political and military threats, but also from economic tensions, environmental degradation, and social insecurity, all relevant for the achievement of the SDGs. Accordingly, and as said by other speakers before, the OSCE has a complementary role to play towards achieving SDGs, notably through enhancing political dialogue and practical work that contributes to sustainable progress. The 2030 Agenda provides a solid strategic framework also for the efforts of the OSCPA, and in particular of its General Committee on Economic Affairs, Science, Technology and Environment. Notably, our 2021 report duly emphasized the correlations between environmental degradation, public health, climate change, and global security, which are at the core of the 2030 Agenda. The report advocates for a more balanced, fair, and carbon-neutral development approach to effectively address our civilization growing development needs while safeguarding our planet. As such, it provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet. Moreover, we tackled several important SDGs throughout our regular initiatives over the last months. For instance, we looked closely at the interrelation between goals number 3, good health and well-being, number 8, economic growth, and number 15, life and on land, during our May 2021 Parliamentary Web Dialogue framing the environmental security public health nexus, science informs policymaking. Similarly, recognizing the critical role that energy plays in fueling our development and shaping our security, we have recently held an interesting policy debate on the clean energy revolution and its implications for the OSCE region. The event allowed us to put into greater focus goals number 7, affordable and clean energy, goal number 9, industry and innovation, and number 12, responsible production and consumption, thereby consolidating our impression that a systemic shift is inevitable, and it will affect both our policies and our behaviors. With the green transition just kicking in, our policies and reforms in this context shall meet, first and foremost, the needs of the people. Finally, building on SDG of goal number 13, climate action, number 11, sustainable cities and communities, and number 17, on partnerships, we have exhorted the OSCE governments to address the climate crisis resolutely, coherently, and cooperatively, in line with the letter and the spirit of the Paris Agreement. This was accomplished through the very timely and detailed parliamentary plea for resolute climate action issued on the occasion of the last COP26. Looking ahead, we must join forces for bold climate action towards drastic reductions in emission of greenhouse gases, development of effective adaptation strategies, mobilization of the necessary financial resources, and of course, international collaboration across the board. Thanks again to Vice President Shakirov, by the way, for joining our plea. In all these efforts, we have treated science and technology as potent allies to promote more informed policies among our ranks, but also to build on the opportunities offered by technological innovation. In our view, science should inform policymaking, and policymaking should be based on sound scientific and technological research. Hence, the need for a stronger science policy interface in our assembly. Dear colleagues, we need to be realistic. Strong political leadership, a common vision, and a shared sense of responsibility are critical to implement the 2030 Agenda. We, parliamentarians, shall act as strong agents of change, both at the national and international levels. At the national level, we need to monitor the sound implementation of the SDGs by our governments and ask for their accountability in this field. At the international level, we must engage within the OSCE, PA, and beyond to share lessons learned and catalyze cooperative efforts for their timely implementation. This event is yet another example, and I would like to commend all of you for organizing it. We are facing a critical juncture in our history, so let's join our forces for a better future. The 2030 Agenda offers us a realistic framework to do just so. Time to act is now. Thank you. Lamberto, I yield the floor back to you.
Thank you very much, Marco, and let's hope that the chair, Pere Pons, can join us at least for the part of the discussion. So I will open now the list of speakers. I already have a number of requests, and I will begin with Mrs. Pia Kauma from Finland. Pia, good afternoon. You have the floor.
Honorable Chairperson, dear colleagues, the Sustainable Development Goals aim for a fairer, a more equitable and greener world for us and generations to come. On Monday, the IPCC released one of its most alarming reports yet. It stated that the effects of climate change have increased with such a speed that they can no longer be mitigated. Our main focus now should be on adaptation. One of the most concerning threats is the effect of climate change on water supplies. Not only will water shortages have a detrimental effect on human health and sanitary conditions, but it will also affect our ability to farm and produce food. Climate change-induced extreme weather phenomena already affect millions of people. Ultimately, the combination of these effects will force people away from their homes to become climate refugees. Each country is responsible for implementing the SDGs. As the OSCE PA Special Representative on Central Asia, I follow the development, especially in these countries, with great concern. Unfortunately, progress has been slow on reforming Central Asian societies, their democratic systems, industrial structures, and energy production, all of which are essential to achieving the SDGs. One special concern is SDG number 7, which covers energy security. This is an important issue for the region with rich but unevenly distributed fossil fuels and water resources. As we saw in the latest energy blackout, the solution cannot be found solely based on national strategies for water and energy use. Rather, it requires enhanced regional cooperation to promote sustainable solutions and investments in new technical innovations. Dear Mr. Chair, fossil fuels such as oil and gas are so-called stranded assets, which means that they will soon lose their value. While Europe is moving away from such polluting energy sources, Russia's and Kazakhstan's economies, for example, rely heavily on fossil fuel exports. This is very short-sighted and involves risks such as income loss, environmental devastation, and water shortages. Coupled with a shrinking space for civil society and engagement, it deprives the nations and their people of economic opportunities and prosperity. It will also affect the geopolitical situation in the region. The SDGs are very much interlinked with the OSCE's concept of comprehensive security, which includes reducing tensions, managing crises, and preventing conflicts. They also highlight that no decisions can be made in isolation, as they will always impact on other issues as well. If we make energy decisions without a thought for their impact on the environment, climate, or the economy in the long run, we will move backwards, not forward. Inaction now will only accelerate the problem in the future. Already now we see tensions rising when an increasing amount of people must share ever scarcer resources. Had it not been for Russia's unexpected war against Ukraine, I would have guessed that the next war would be about water. Implementing the SDGs require mobilization and involvement of all stakeholders in society. Parliaments play a crucial role. As decision makers, we must be aware of what we have signed up for as nations and ensure that our governments respect their commitments. This means ensuring that all legislative projects are weighed against SDGs and rejecting any decision going against them. In Finland, the Parliament debates the government white paper on the implementation of the SDGs every 4 years. Also, our Committee for the Future, as well as local, regional and civil society actors, were actively involved in drafting Finland's latest progress report to the United Nations. Dear Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, linking the implementation of the SDGs to the Helsinki Plus 50 Call for Action process is important. Several of the goals are fundamental to the mission of our organization. I commend the OSCE for keeping the SDGs on the agenda. 2030 is not that far away, and we must keep up the momentum. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Vice President Kauma, for your remarks. I would like to thank you also for the strong accent you put on the issue of climate change. This is an area where we all have also a very clear responsibility towards future generations. Ms. Kari Henriksen, I understand, is no longer available, unfortunately. So I will give the floor to Mrs. Marilou McFedran from Canada.
Thank you very much, and greetings to everyone with wishes for peace. I want to speak about an issue that I think is difficult for us to discuss. And so I simply want to ask that we bring this into our consciousness. And that is the new treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons and the wake-up call that the Russian president has given to the world about the reality of the destruction of our entire civilization through the fact that we have in numerous countries more than enough nuclear weapons to annihilate all of humanity and anything living, and to bring to the forefront of our considerations as parliamentarians the fact that the TPNW now really has made nuclear weapons illegal for our world. And as we see this threat playing out hour by hour against rule-based international order, let us factor in the reality of a possible nuclear strike. Thank you very much.
Thank you for raising this issue, and I have to say I fully support your suggestion. After all, in the OSCE, we have 4 of the 5 nuclear weapons states under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So the OSCE has, a good opportunity to try to put this issue on the agenda and try to be, a promoter of progress on this in this area. So I certainly personally would like to encourage you as parliamentarians to talk about this and hopefully help movement in the direction indicated by Mrs. McFarlane. Thank you. Now, next speaker is Mr. Andrei Savik from Belarus. You have the floor, sir. We cannot hear you. I'm sorry, Mr. Savik, we can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself?
Включите еще раз. Вот сейчас, по-моему. Добрый день. Вы сейчас слышно? Нажмите «Включите звук».
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yes. Благодарю вас, уважаемый господин модератор. Уважаемые коллеги, для Республики Беларусь, как страны с высокой степенью открытости экономики, торговля и транспорт являются важными драйверами экономического развития, а значит и драйверами, позволяющими обеспечить достижение целей устойчивого развития. Беларусь не закрывала свою экономику во время пандемии, что позволило достаточно плавно пройти наиболее острые фазы этого масштабного эпидемиологического кризиса. В частности, по итогам 2021 года экономический рост в стране составил почти 2,5%. На треть увеличился объем внешней торговли. К сожалению, мы сегодня сталкиваемся с применением мер экономического принуждения, с экономическими санкциями, которые противоречат международному праву и на практике препятствуют достижению нами целей ООН. На протяжении месяцев на Беларусь оказывается массированное внешнее воздействие с применением широкого спектра дискриминационных мер. Секторальные экономические санкции затронули целый ряд отраслей, нарушая социально-экономические права сотен тысяч работников. В отношении моей страны введена авиационная блокада. Этот беспрецедентный шаг противоречит основополагающим международно-правовым нормам в сфере международной гражданской авиации. Торговые ограничения в отношении одного из крупнейших производителей калийных удобрений, Беларусь Калия, уже привели к негативным последствиям для мирового рынка. Существенно выросла стоимость калийных удобрений, потери несут фермерские хозяйства по всему миру. Замечу, что все это происходит на фоне острого продовольственного кризиса, климатических изменений, роста цен на продукты питания и сохранения проблемы голода в рамках регионов мира. Введенный Литвой запрет на транзит удобрений из Беларуси усугубляет эту ситуацию и идет вразрез с международным правом, включая принципы и нормы ВТО. Мы, конечно, призываем наших партнеров отказаться от использования односторонних принудительных мер, противоречащих духу и принципам международного сотрудничества в деле достижения целей устойчивого развития. Но хотим заверить, что вопреки всем враждебным действиям, направленным прежде всего в реальности против целей устойчивого развития, мы в Республике Беларусь сделаем все от нас зависящее для их реального достижения. Благодарю вас за внимание.
Thank you very much, Mr. Savinik. Mr. Hajiani, who was on the list, also unfortunately had to leave, so he won't be able to intervene. So while I would ask if anyone else at this point wants to take the floor or comment, I would like to come in with a comment and a piece of information also from my side. Because Mr. Savinik now was talking about obstacles to implementation of SDGs, but I would like to echo the opening words of President Sederfeld in the beginning on Goal 16 and the critical importance of Goal 16 in this time of conflict, and that conflict is also an obstacle for us to implementing that goal. We should not forget that. What I wanted to mention is that as I served as the Secretary General of the OSCE a few years ago, I attended on 26th of September 2015, so 7 years ago, the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit. And at that summit of heads of state and government of the UN countries, members, I delivered an address on behalf of the OSCE. And in my address, I was focusing on the 5 pillars that have been mentioned earlier in the statements: peace, people, planet, prosperity, and partnerships. And I would like to quote myself, in a way, in my intervention, talking about the first of these pillars. When I said first, peace, we convene, and this was 2015, we convene at a critical time for global and regional security. Armed conflict is once again a reality also on European soil, and divisions within the OSCE region are growing, undermining the very foundations of both European and international security. And I am very sorry to have to say that we have only done worse since then, and we had a clear early warning of what was about to come, and we were announcing that to the world. In the OSCE, we have an organization that has the ability to act, to prevent conflict, and to help the regional community to move towards the implementation of sustainable development for all of us in a context where security remains and security defined in a very broad manner, security including economic cooperation, including the respect of human rights, including strong democratic institutions, remains at the core of what the OSCE does. So we're not done very well in this context, but we have an organization that is well placed for acting to this. We need leadership. We need attention, and strong leadership and attention are something that parliamentarians can promote from their perspectives. So I would like to encourage all of you to focus on this, on the discussion, the points that have been made today. They're all very important, and on all of them there is quite some room for all of you to take initiatives to try to address the serious problems that we have on the table today. I see that President Sederfeld would like to comment. President, you're very welcome, and please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sanier. I would also like to congratulate to a very good and interesting web dialogue here. And I am so pleased to see that there is a huge interest among members in OSCE Parliamentary Assembly for the SDGs and the Agenda 2030. When I was elected as president the summer 2021, one of my topics that I thought was very important was the climate, but it was also the Agenda 2030. And I am really appreciate that Vice President Shakirov accepted the appointment as a special representative on the SDGs, because I think it's so important that there is a leadership, political leadership on this, that there is a person who is responsible, who can go further on, and also, of course, the cooperation with the Secretariat on this. And I think with this dialogue today, have we taken several steps forward by highlighting the different parts of the SDGs, as there are 17 of them. It's several aspects, and we as parliamentarians need to keep all of them in our mind. And I think if we could continue like this in this positive manner, there is a very good future for the implementation of them. Of course, it's not always the EPA who do this. We are giving the floor for multilateralism, for dialogue, for exchange of views and perspective. And when I listened to the dialogue today, I could just notice that it's a very, a huge respect for each other and sharing of knowledge and best practice. And this is exactly what we need to do more of as parliamentarians. So I look forward to the upcoming dialogues. As was mentioned earlier, 2030 is very soon here. Yes, it is. But now we have entered the stairs up to 2030 and learning from best practice. And that's the way it should be. Even when it's very difficult time, like the war in Ukraine, we are still continuing our work for a more secure and safe world. And the Agenda 30 is one of those tools we can use, and we should do, of course. And now it's vote in the Swedish Parliament, and I have to close down and leave the meetings. But thank you very much, both Ambassador Sanier and Vice President Shakirov for this event. And thank you to all the speakers. It's have really been an interesting webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, for your leadership and your active participation in our event. Have a nice evening from all of us. I have now a request from Mr. Del Barba from Italy. You have the floor, sir.
I thank you very much for organizing this important conference. I think that the theme of the economy and the achievement of a sustainable development model that is compatible with the SDGs is the most important tool we have to achieve peace, and that it should be at the center of our organization that deals with economic security. In this regard, we should ask ourselves, who is responsible for achieving the SDGs? And try to explain why we should increasingly consider the role of business, the role of companies. Business can be the army of the SDGs. The most important protagonist of this change certainly must go through the decision of the institution like the one we belong, of course, but which will never materialize except through the behavior of business and consumers. Competition is the earth of the market that underlies our economy. However, companies make their decision based on what we ask them. And what we ask them, we ask to respect the law and to maximize profit, of course. And today, this is no longer sufficient because laws will never be able to contain in real time all the action that we need for the achievement of the SDGs target. Consequently, a large margin of decision making that we leave to entrepreneur will be left solely to the lever of profit, which is important, of course, for measuring the effectiveness of companies' action. But without the ethical value that this revolution needs, dear colleagues, we have the opportunity to recruit companies to do the right thing and compete to be the first that reach the SDGs. This result is achieved by giving a new legal form to companies, as some states have already done. For instance, Italy, France, many states in South America, United States, and many other countries, where the company is required to pursue the objective of profit, of course, And the common benefit, what are common benefits, are a translation of SDGs for companies. The OSCE has already understood this issue. And in a resolution of July 2019, approved in Luxembourg, we appoint this at point 80 and 81. So finally, this recommendation that we approved in 2019 are still current and urgent today. I believe it is worthwhile to insist on this point, and not only to try to make important decisions inside the institution, but we have to try to involve business, to involve entrepreneurs in this important responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your considerations, Mr. Barba. I think it's a very practical suggestion that you're putting forward, and that's something that should be developed further, I think, and it's good to refer back also to recommendations that have already been adopted. So it's a matter of implementation, focusing on the implementation now. So I think certainly in the second committee, and we will make sure that Pere Pons is made aware also of your statement and your encouragement to go ahead. There should be a more targeted initiative, perhaps, to try to enhance the implementation, put more accent on the implementation of this very practical steps that you are suggesting. So thank you very much for your contribution. So at this point, I have no other lists. I see that there is a comment from Senator McFadden. I'm just looking at it now. It's a communication to all of you. So I would like to encourage you to just to take a look at it. It's in the chat. And I see Audrey Glover wants to intervene. Audrey, you're very welcome and good to see you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, and it's very good to see you too. Just a small question. I was just wondering to what extent, if at all, that the OSCE field missions might have the implementation of SDGs on their agenda, in their programs, or in what they do, and if they don't, could that be inserted in their programs? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. On this, I would encourage, maybe if he feels like this, Ambassador Fratini to react. From what I can remember from my time, putting the implementation of the SDGs as such in the mandate of any of the executive structures is complicated, because not everybody in the OSCE believes that the OSCE should, even though it is a regional organization operating under Chapter 8 of the UN Charter, but this doesn't mean that automatically the OSCE has a responsibility or a task of assisting the UN in implementing the goals from a regional perspective. One should, and there is obviously no consensus at what goals would be relevant. In fact, what is happening is that the OSCE is de facto implementing the goals through its many mandates in the Secretariat, in the institutions, and in the field. So it's a bit of a piecemeal approach where some goals, in fact, do coincide with the mandates of the missions, and therefore they get implemented. But I don't want to, to do the job of Ambassador Fratini. So if he wants to come in and comment, he is very welcome to do so.
Thank you, Ambassador Zanier. Of course, I would never contradict a former Secretary General of the OSCE, nor have I much to add to what he said. Maybe just one element in addition is that not all the participating states of the OSCE are members of the United Nations. So that also complicates things when it comes to, I'm referring to the Holy See in particular, which has an observer status. This is just a technical detail, but no, the main, I would say, driver for having or not having the SDGs implemented by the field operations is the, of course, the mandate, which is based on an agreement with the host country. So each field operation is based on what actually the host country wants it to do. Should the host country wish to have a focus on any of the topics which are in the list of sustainable development goals, there is nothing against that. And some of our mandates in some field operations are quite comprehensive. As Ambassador Zanier will recall, there is several missions which have activities in all three dimensions, and by doing this encompass a large number of SDGs. Another consideration that shows precisely how dynamic this matter is, which allows for further room for improvement, is that until a few years ago, security and climate change was considered as a taboo topic in the OSCE context. It was said by many delegations that the organization would go nowhere near that. Yet now there is a decision by the Ministerial Council taken last December. So I have the feeling, and it is of course my hope, that a further shift of OSCE activities towards implementation of the SDGs in this crucial decade could indeed happen. Of course, we should not forget that the organization works under very hard resource constraints, both in terms of finance and in terms of human resources. And therefore, further enlarging the scope of activities should go in parallel with adequate resourcing. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Ambassador Fratini, dear Luca, and thanks to Dame Glover Dame Audrey, sorry, for raising this important issue, put it on the agenda. So that's something we'll keep, and I'm sure also from a parliamentary perspective, looking at and trying to, how can I say, support the executive structures as they engage further in the implementation of the goals. Again, I have no other speakers, so I perhaps might give the floor back to Vice President Shakirov to see if he has any final comments from his side on the basis of this discussion we heard today.
Thank you, dear Ambassador Zanier. Dear colleagues, achieving the SDGs is undoubtedly an ambitious task that countries are not able to overcome alone by mobilizing only internal resources. Parliamentarians need to leverage existing legitimacy and the increased willingness of the population to change in order to implement stronger actions under the 2030 agenda. Today we had interesting speeches and substantive discussions. I would like to thank Madam President for participating in our event and giving high assessment of my activity as a special representative on SDGs. We are joined by an impressive set of guests comprising representatives of international organizations, OSCE's governmental side, and national parliaments, which is fully in line with the spirit of SDGs 17, aimed at revitalizing the global partnerships for sustainable development. I would like to thank our speakers for their excellent presentations. I am grateful to the Speaker of the Senate of the Republic of Uzbekistan, respected Tanzila Narbayeva, for presenting their country's experience in achieving the SDGs, as well as to the Regional Director for Europe of World Health Organization, Mr. Hans Kluge, and the Director of the Office of the OSCE Secretary General, Ambassador Luca Fratini, for taking the time and participating in our web dialogue. The Deputy Director and Senior Economist at the UNDP Regional Bureau for Europe and the CIS, Mr. Ben Slay, has addressed through a video his message. It means that our event went beyond the scope of the OSCE. We have established a bridge for further cooperation with the UN on this issue. I am also grateful to the chairman of the second committee, Mr. Perayon Pons, for his interesting presentation and ideas. Thank you all for bringing your knowledge and experience and participating in such constructive and open exchange of views. Your proposals and recommendations will be included in the text of a supplementary item to the declaration, which will be adopted at the annual session in Birmingham in July. I invite all of you to become co-sponsors of this resolution. I am grateful to our moderator, high-level expert, Ambassador Lamberto Zanier. As always, you were impressively well prepared and extremely professional in the way you kept us all at the peak of our attention for nearly 2 hours. I am grateful to the International Secretariat, especially to head of the OSCE PA Vienna office, Daria Bayarskaya, for organizing such a great event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice President Shakirov, and I would like also to congratulate you for the initiative of this discussion, for helping us put it in the perspective of the Helsinki Plus 40, but also for what you just said, which is that you try to operationalize this discussion by promoting recommendations for the summer session of the Parliamentary Assembly. I think that is a very good idea, and that's also in the spirit of what we are doing, making sure that the points that come out of our discussion, and it was an interesting one where many angles were brought to attention and put in the spotlight. I think it's always very good when there is a further step to operationalize them. And I hope that this discussion will also facilitate your further work as the special representative on this important topic. So this concludes our meeting. I would like to thank everybody for their contributions to the discussion. I would like also to take this opportunity to remind you that the next meeting in the Call for Action Helsinki Plus 50 process will be an in-person meeting that will take place in Baku, Azerbaijan, on the 27th, 28th of April, on the topic of the role of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly in promoting security and stability through green economy, connectivity and sustainable development. Also, this will be done in cooperation with the second committee of the Parliamentary Assembly, and delegations will be cordially invited to come to Baku for this discussion. Ideally, up to 3 members for each delegation will be invited to attend. So thanks once again to all of you, and I wish you a nice productive evening. Goodbye. Thank you.